Hey guys, this is Eric Weingarten with Weingarten Racing. Today's video is a dyno video, so I get to actually show you some different stuff. This one's particularly about the difference in horsepower between two different cams on an LS engine. And I know you're like, well, I've seen this other places. Different stuff. It's different. But anyway, let me kind of give you a breakdown what it is. So I have many dyno mules that I use for testing. I have a small block Chevy, of course, right now it's a little bit out of service. Big block Chevy, and an LS. And today's video is actually about the LS. Here's what it is. It's a 408 LS. It's got the scat rotating assembly, but it's got the icon pistons in it. In the configuration you're seeing, it will have two different sets of heads you're going to get to see. It's the AFR LS3 enforcer heads, not the cathedral one. It's the actual LS3 enforcer heads. And then also the stock 823 heads that have been valve jobbed and blended. No port work beyond that. I mean, that's not really even port work. That's just pretty much refreshing the head. The two camshafts that were tested in this, the first one was the BTR camshaft, the Truck Norris. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you the specs now just because I don't want to forget later. It has 212 degrees of duration at 50 thousandths on the intake, and they say 220 something on the exhaust. You might say, why do they always do that? Why do they put an X at the end? Well, here's the reason why, and I could probably give you a pretty good idea why. Because what will happen is people will look at that specs, and then they'll go find something that's cheaper than them and buy that. And then like BTR is like, hey man, I did all this development, and someone else is stealing it. But by the way, that doesn't give away all the specs of the camshaft. There's a whole lot more that's besides just those duration. As far as the lift on that BTR camshaft, it's 552 on intake and exhaust. It's a 107 LSA. That's the first camshaft that's tested. The second one is from Texas Speed, and it's their stage 2 for an LS3. Now this one's, it's bigger. There's no way to do it. It's a 229 duration on intake at 50 thousandths, 244 on exhaust, 629 lift on intake, 615 on exhaust, 112 lobe separation, and it says it's 109 instant center line. And you might be asking, did you degree your camshaft in? And no. The BTR actually was, because that was the first one was in there, but as far as the Texas Speed, no, we just shoved it in. So I didn't put a degree of wheel or none of that stuff. More of a time thing, in case you're wondering. Do I think it affected it? Absolutely not. Here's what I will say from all my dyno testing. You can move around that cam timing, like with belt drives, is really easy, especially on the small block Chevy, big block Chevy, LSs have them too, I'm sure. But changing that cam timing, you would think makes a huge difference. All it really does is just shift where it occurs. And we're talking like maybe 3-4 horsepower difference. That's not the difference we saw today. So that's it. The compression ratio for this deal, because it's a flat top engine, it's 10.9 compression ratio. So on the 823s, it had 1 cc larger chamber. I think it was the AFR Enforcer were like 70.2 cc's as measured, like I measured them. And the stock 823s were 69.2. So 1 cc difference, really not enough to make a difference. I didn't test with fuel injected. It was carbureted. It had an Edelbrock Victor Jr. intake manifold, no spacer, because several people are like, you shouldn't run a spacer, which in later videos I'll show you the difference a spacer makes. You should run a spacer. And 1000 CFM 4150 Demon carburetor. It's ran on a mix of pump gas and 112. Really, that's just more for safety. The timing was set at a constant 29 degrees. So if you watched the previous video, I told you a cool timing trick. I didn't do that till after this was already done. This part of the testing was already done. So both of the camshafts were straight 29 degrees. And before someone starts instantly tapping, know this. What you think is best doesn't always what the engine wants best. And I think it's even worse with LSs, and I know I'm getting off a little rant here, so just bear with me. Typically on a small block Chevy, big block Chevys, Fords, whatever, we have a timing pointer, and we can look down and we can actually use a timing light and get the exact what the timing should be, as long as when we built the engine, we put a timing pointer in the right spot. LSs don't really have that unless you put one on. So what a lot of you think is, I've got 29 degrees. Do you really? Because what's happening is it's using the cam sensor and the crank sensor, and that's where it's estimating what it should be, your actual timing. The catch is, that's based on the fact that that reluctor wheel that's on the crankshaft is in the exact perfect spot. So you're like, well, it has to be. No, a little bit of a change in movement in that that reluctant wheel is going to say I'm actually at 0 when yours could be a few degrees off. So someone else's LS engine might run right at 29 degrees and yours might run horrible at 29 degrees. Has very little to do actually with the degrees and more with, was the reluctant wheel in the right spot? So unless you actually put which when the heads go off this next time, I might do it. Unless you actually make a physical pointer, so in other words, you bring the piston up top dead center and you make a pointer and you've got a degree wheel on your harmonic balancer and you can actually check your actual timing. You really don't know. You're just assuming. So I'm going to do that. The second thing I want to get to, because I know I'm off on a rant, several people say, well, that's too much timing. At the end, so after all the testing was done, I went back, and that's what that last video was about, checking to see if I couldn't do a trick with the timing to make more power. After all the testing was done, I tried 27 degrees, lost power. So then I tried 31 degrees, lost power. 29 was it. So you could change that curve like I showed you in the last video and make more power, but it was 29 degrees straight across. I just want to get that out of the way. I know it was a little rant in there, and you're really wanting to see the camshaft stuff. So let's show you the dyno results, because I'll go pretty quick through this and this. Before I do that though, some of you will probably have a hard time seeing it on the screen because you didn't want to watch a commercial, so you're watching this little bitty thumbnail. It's like this big. If you want to actually purchase the text of these actual dyno sheets that I'm getting ready to show you, you can go to my website, go to my online store. The link will be in the description. And for 30 bucks, I will text you every single dyno sheet that was done for that last dyno session. So not just the cam, the heads were tested, different carbs were tested, different intake spacers were tested, actually different intake manifolds were tested. You'll get all that, so you don't have to wait for me to put out another video. It's 30 bucks, you get them all texted to you. You don't have to wait for me to go through the speech on and describing and trying to teach you if you're just wanting the info instead of other stuff to go with it. But anyway, link is in the description. I should point out too, it's probably going to expire relatively soon because on Thursday, the LS engine's going back on the dyno to try different stuff. This is a set of 243 cathedral port heads that I've ported, and I'm going to put those on the 408 and try that. And also I'm going to try the small bore Pro Max LS3 heads. So this one's going to be kind of high. I'm kind of thinking too, I'm going to bring some E85 because I got an E85 carburetor there. And I might do a test on that just to see as well. But I only say that because whenever I finish a dyno session, I stop selling the text version of the last one, and it will only be available in a book, which brings up the next thing. You can pre-order the book now. The book is available on my website, on my online store, link in the description. You could purchase the entire thing. So once I get done testing all the heads, so yeah, I'm doing 2 more on Thursday, but that's still 2 more heads to do and a couple more camshaft. Once all that's done, that becomes one book. So we'll have all this stuff, everything. That will be then sent out. So you could pre-order now. The book's kind of pricey because it's probably going to be like this thick from all the testing that's in it. But anyway, that's that. Let's get to the results so we can see what we're talking about. Let's go. Okay, here are the results. This is just to recap this one. This is the 823 heads when it had the BTR camshaft in it. So this is just the stock heads that have been valve job. And you remember it made 565 horsepower. So when we switched to the AFR Enforcer heads, same BTR camshaft, we went to 567. So it looked like it only gained a few horsepower, not very much. Same with the torque, the overlay is about 10, okay? Before I forget, ignore the air fuel ratios on every one of these sheets because this is calculated. This is not from an O2 sensor. Either the air head or the fuel turbine's messing up, and I'm going to check it next time I go to the dyno. But this was just wrong. So these are not the correct air fuel ratios. It was right. But anyway, this was where we left off. AFR Enforcers, BTR camshaft. Let's just change to this Texas speed. So we're going to go from this to that. It's big. 631 horsepower now. So you went from 568 almost to 631 horsepower. That is a humongous gain. So that's 30, almost 70 horsepower gain from a camshaft. You're like, well, did it kill torque then? If we look here, the torque on the BTR was only about 537-ish, 48. We're now 553, almost 554, 51. So it actually still made more torque, but you really want to see the overlay to get a better idea. So let me show you. The gains are monumental. This black line, BTR camshaft, Truck Norris. Red, Texas Speed. These are both with the AFR Enforcer LS3 heads. If you look, this pull is about 3,600 RPM when we're starting. The BTR camshaft is in fact better, and it should be because it's smaller, all the way to about 4,700 RPM. After that, it's all over but the crying. That's so much better. I'm telling you, at the track, the Texas Speed is going to walk away. Now, if you're towing something, I'd probably pick the BTR camshaft. But yes, that is a humongous gain. No, I did not expect it to make that much of a gain. And yes, that's a lot of power. Now, one of the things you might be tempted right now to do is say, well, screw ever getting the AFR Enforcer heads. Just buy the camshaft and use the stock 823 heads. Because those Enforcer heads only gain 3 horsepower. The cam gained 70. It might have been the order in which it was done. So one of the things that I didn't do correctly, and I'm about to explain how I messed this up, was a good test also would have been if I'd still used that Texas Speed camshaft with the 823s. If the difference in power would have been more with the AFR Enforcer LS3 heads with the Texas Speed camshaft. Because remember, it's only 3 horsepower when we use the BTR camshaft. But would it be bigger if I had used it do a comparison between the stock heads and these AFR Enforcers with the bigger camshaft? And here's how I messed up. The very first test we had done was actually with the Texas Speed camshaft with the 823 heads. What I didn't know, and this goes back to the video on Saturday, was that the timing it wasn't locked out at that time. So at that time, the timing wasn't locked out. So it would read it as, and it's based off of manifold pressure. So if it had less manifold pressure, it would retard the timing more. It's just the way it was programmed because it didn't have a straight timing curve. So what it was doing was when the stock 823 heads were on with the Texas Speed camshaft, it was taking out more timing than when I did this. So with this one, all these right here that you see, it's straight 29 degrees. I only figured it out after this. This is the 823 heads with the Texas Speed camshaft, but the timing's not locked out. So I can't use it as a comparison, but I am showing you just for your reference. So if you look with the Texas Speed camshaft and with the stock 823s, it still made 596 and 513 torque. Looks like it's a turd. This only had 21 degrees of timing. So I don't know. I do know it will make more power if I added more timing. If I'd brought this up, gave it the 8 degrees more that it needed to be at 29, this whole power might have come up, and it might have been the same situation where it had been really close to that. Or it might not have, but it's all speculation because I messed that up. It was after this test, all the other tests took place, and that's when all the other tests were at 29 degrees. This is what showed me I messed up, and it's after we'd already changed the camshaft, so I couldn't go back. Not without spending another hour changing back to changing back to the other heads. So there's a little bit of a disappointment for you as far as the data, but at least you got it. So anyway, point I'm trying to make with all that, if you're just saying, well, the camshaft's worth more than the heads, if the camshaft had been in there first and we just switched heads, the heads might have made the bigger change and not necessarily the camshaft. Sometimes it's just the order of it. And I say that because LS camshaft guys are for sure salesmen. And no doubt it shows that they made great power. But if you'd put on the heads first, or put on the cam first, then the heads, the bigger gain might have come from the heads, not the cam. Hopefully you understood what I'm saying. I kind of rambled there. But anyway, there's your results. It's pretty massive. And I will do a follow-up because some of you are probably right now, well, how close is that to the small block Chevy? It didn't beat it. It didn't. Small block 406 still beating it. But on a 4150 carburetor, it's close. Really close. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Remember, I'm no Superman. Please purchase the books and stuff or the text copies of this because that money goes for more dyno testing. That's the only reason why I'm maybe testing on Wednesday, because I finally had enough money from the people who bought books and stuff to test again. So anyway, thanks for watching. I don't port cast iron heads. I'm no Superman. You guys take care.